Chapter 1881. Rejected Jian Wushuang did not know. The 8 Emperor Swords were extremely intelligent and they knew how to choose their master. Moreover, they were Emperor Swords which were born specially for the Emperor Sword principle. In the Emperor Sword Palace, they would not care about experts who practiced normal sword principles. Only people who had comprehended the Emperor Sword principles via the sword grave had the right to be their master. For example, back then, the founder of the Emperor Sword sect had managed to get one Emperor Sword to recognize him as its master as he had comprehended the Emperor Sword principle. However, the founder of the Emperor Sword sect's affinity for comprehension was limited. After spending 1,000 years of time, he had only barely managed to comprehend the first move of the Emperor Sword principle. Hence, he had barely achieved the requirement for them to recognize him as their master. But what about Jian Wushuang? Similarly, it had also been 1,000 years. To be exact, he had merely used 870 years of time. With that, he had managed to comprehend the first 3 moves of the Emperor Sword principle. As such, his talents for comprehending were many times higher than that of the founder of the Emperor Sword sect. Hence, those Emperor Swords had fought amongst one another to recognize a genius like him as their master. The 8 of you. As Jian Wushuang looked at the 8 Emperor Swords which were shaking crazily, he laughed indifferently. Since all of you are willing to recognize me as your master, why don't all of you leave with me? It was obvious that Jian Wushuang had the intention to take away all the 8 Emperor Swords. It should be known that the 8 Emperor Swords were 8 extremely powerful chaos divine treasures. However, after hearing Jian Wushuang's words, the 8 Emperor Swords became vehement. Jian Wushuang's expression changed slightly and he continued to communicate with the 8 Emperor Swords. As for those experts who were not too far away, when they saw such a scene, they had puzzled expressions. Moreover, most of them were also looking at Jian Wushuang with envy. That's right. It was envy. They had done their very best and they yearned for even one Emperor Sword to recognize them as its master. In the end, none of them Emperor Swords was willing to accept them. As for Jian Wushuang, the Emperor Swords fought among one another to recognize him as its master. Such a difference was really extremely huge. All of a sudden, HMPH. With a cold snort, the expression of Jian Wushuang, who was communicating with the 8 Emperor Swords, turned cold abruptly. He then waved his big hands and he completely ignored the 8 Emperor Swords, no matter how much noise they made or shook. After that, he turned his body and left without turning his head back at all. The 8 Emperor Swords continued to make noises intensely. However, after that, they returned to their own positions in succession and in no time, they quietened down. Such a scene had caused everyone present to become dumbfounded. Sword Emperor, what's going on? Luo Xianxia walked in front of Jian Wushuang immediately. Just now, those 8 Emperor Swords wanted to recognize you as their master, right? That's right. They had planned to recognize me as their master. Moreover, I can choose any of them. However, they were all rejected by me, Jian Wushuang said right away. You rejected them? Luo Xianxia opened her eyes wide. The surrounding people were also filled with disbelief. Although the Emperor Swords wanted to recognize Jian Wushuang as their master, they were all rejected by Jian Wushuang in the end. Why did he reject them? How could reject them? Just now, I communicated with those Emperor Swords and I planned to take all of them away. However, it's a pity that the 8 Emperor Swords are extremely arrogant. Indeed, as Emperor Swords which stand at the top, they are naturally extremely arrogant. As such, they are not satisfied with sharing the same master with any other swords at the same time. Therefore, not only would they not recognize me as their master at the same time, the moment one of them recognized me as its master, I could only use it as my only weapon for sword principles. They are really unreasonable, Jian Wushuang sneered. He had seen unreasonable people and unreasonable sects before. However, this was the first time that he had seen unreasonable swords. The 8 Emperor Swords were indeed extremely unreasonable and arrogant. As such, they would definitely not allow other swords to share a same master with them. However, for those Emperor Swords to be so unreasonable, this also shows how powerful they are. Even if you were to use it as your only weapon for sword principles in the future, wouldn't it not be a loss? Luo Xianxia could not help but ask. The surrounding people nodded their heads earnestly. The more unreasonable a sword was, the more frightening its power was. Since the Emperor swords were so unreasonable, they would definitely be extremely powerful. With such a weapon on hand, why would they still need to use other swords? Hence, almost everyone present would agree to that condition without hesitation. However, Jian Wushuang rejected it. I already have my own weapon. Even if the Emperor sword were to recognize me as its master, it would still be in second place in my heart. Wanting me to abandon my own weapon and use it as my only weapon is just some nonsense spouted by an idiot. Jian Wushuang's eyes were ice cold. When he had communicated with the 8 Emperor swords moments ago, the moment he knew their request, he had become furious at once. There was no doubt that the 8 Emperor swords were extremely powerful. At the very least, among the sword-type weapons that Jian Wushuang had seen, none of them was stronger than the 8 Emperor swords. Even when placed in the ancient past, the 8 Emperor swords could also be considered first-rate treasures. However, although the Emperor swords were powerful, his Blood Mountain sword was not weak. Perhaps the power of the Blood Mountain sword then was far from being comparable to that of the 8 Emperor swords. However, the Blood Mountain sword was an embryo sword and there was still a huge room for it to grow. When it grew up completely in the future, it would not be weaker than the 8 Emperor swords in the slightest. Moreover, it might even be stronger. Furthermore, the Blood Mountain sword came from his master and it was something that his master had bestowed upon him personally. Hence, it contained his master's feelings. The most important thing was the position that the Blood Mountain sword had in Jian Wushuang's heart. It should be known that starting from the Green Fire world, Jian Wushuang had always fought with the Blood Mountain sword side by side and to date, it was unknown how many years it had been. Just like the King of Venomous Worms, the Blood Mountain sword was a battle companion that he had trusted the most and it was also his brother. Not to mention one Emperor sword, even if 8 Emperor swords, 80 Emperor swords or even 800 Emperor swords were used, he would absolutely not abandon the Blood Mountain sword. As such, moments ago, he had rejected the 8 Emperor swords without hesitation and left. Of course, to other people, it was absurd. It was to the extent that some people could not help but roar within their hearts. Although they had done their very best, they were still unable to obtain the big opportunity that was given to Jian Wushuang for free. Moreover, among the 8 Emperor swords, Jian Wushuang could pick any of them. In the end, Jian Wushuang had rejected all of them? What kind of resolve was that? Also, how big was the gap between them and Jian Wushuang? When they looked at the comparison, it was really infuriating. The recognition of masters by the Emperor swords has come to an end. Luo Xianxia, let's go out. Jian Wushuang looked at Luo Xianxia. Although Luo Xianxia had not completely calmed down yet, upon hearing Jian Wushuang's words, she nodded her head. Before she left, her eyes could not help but glance at the 8 Emperor swords again. She then sighed lightly. After that, she left the Emperor Sword Palace via the exit. As for the remaining experts, although they had mixed feelings, they were also extremely upset. However, it was a pity that the Emperor swords had chosen to recognize Jian Wushuang as their master instead of them. As such, they could not do anything and could only leave with dissatisfaction. The vast Emperor Sword Palace became peaceful again and only the 8 Emperor swords which stood upright atop the sacrificial altar proudly like before remained. Perhaps after many years, someone would comprehend the Emperor sword principle in the sword grave and take some of them away. However, this person would definitely not be Jian Wushuang. Chapter 1882. Jealous outside Emperor Sword Palace, Emperor Sword Sect Master and the others were waiting patiently. After Jian Wushuang and the others came out from Emperor Sword Palace, they went forward to greet them. Not long after Jian Wushuang and the others had exited Emperor Sword Palace, the entrance to Emperor Sword Palace closed. The next opening would be another 1 million years later. Jiyu Deng, has there been any incident in Emperor Sword Palace in the past 1,000 years? Emperor Sword Sect Master looked at a young man in a red robe. The young man in the red robe, real god Jiyu Deng, entered Emperor Sword Palace with Jian Wushuang and Luo Xianxia. During the 1,000 years of comprehension, nothing happened. But in the end, real god Jiyu Deng reported to Emperor Sword Sect Master in all honesty. What? King Swords recognized Jian Wushuang as their owner and he rejected them? The people from Emperor Sword Sect were shocked. Emperor Sword Sect Master was staring into the void as unprecedented jealousy burnt. One should know that King Sword's owner recognition was a great opportunity. In the history of Emperor Sword Sect, there was only the founder, his master, who had received a king's sword. With the king's sword, the founder of Emperor Sword Sect was extremely scary. If it were to be in the current times, he could absolutely be in the top 20 in Heaven and Earth Supreme ranking list. He might not even be too far off from the #1 Emperor God, Underworld God. It was a pity that the founder of Emperor Sword Sect had passed away because of a danger he had come across when he was wandering in ancient mystery land many years ago. Then, he took control of Emperor Sword Sect. However, in terms of power, opportunities, or even disposition, he was far behind his master. He had taken control of Emperor Sword Sect for so many years. The power of Emperor Sword Sect didn't get stronger but weaker instead. As for King Swords in Emperor Sword Palace, his desire to get King Swords was far higher than anyone else's. He wanted to reach the level of his master through King Sword's owner recognition, but it was a pity that he had failed countless times in Emperor Sword Palace. But Jian Wushuang. King Swords took the initiative to recognize him as the owner, but he had rejected them. Emperor Sword Sect Master was, of course, jealous. Of course, no matter how jealous he was, Emperor Sword Sect Master didn't dare to show it. Sword Emperor, Luo Xianxia, Emperor Sword Palace is closed and it will be opened again in another 1,000,000 years. I wonder if the two of you would like to stay in Emperor Sword Sect or? Emperor Sword Sect Master asked humbly. There are many things to be taken care of in Lineage of Star. I shall not trouble you further, Jian Wushuang replied. I shall leave too. Luo Xianxia looked cold. If so, I shall send the two of you off. Emperor Sword Sect Master was extremely courteous. Jian Wushuang and Luo Xianxia didn't stay and left Emperor Sword Sect as Emperor Sword Sect Master saw them off. In the void outside Emperor Sword Sect, Jian Wushuang and Luo Xianxia stood side by side. Sword Emperor, Emperor Sword Sect Master looks to be polite to you. But I can tell that he harbored hatred in him, Luo Xianxia said. I took action to corner the entire Emperor Sword Sect and I even killed one of their Sir Gods. It'd be weird if Emperor Sword Sect Master didn't hate me, Jian Wushuang laughed. Not only Luo Xianxia could tell, but Jian Wushuang also saw through him. He was so readable. Plus, Jian Wushuang knew that Emperor Sword Sect Master was temporarily fearful of his power and he didn't dare to display his hatred. Hence, his humble behavior. But in actual fact, he was dying to suck his blood dry and eat his flesh. Besides, Jian Wushuang was sure that when the Master of Star Palace's death was verified in no time, all forces and experts would launch an attack on Lineage of Star with all sorts of reasons. Emperor Sword Sect would definitely hit them when they were down. That was a definite. However, even though Jian Wushuang knew that for sure, he couldn't just destroy Emperor Sword Sect. Emperor Sword Sect, in Eternal Chaotic World, their foundation and power in Sanctuary Alliance are too solid. It's okay if I just teach Emperor Sword Sect Master a lesson casually. Sanctuary Alliance wouldn't care. But if I were to destroy Emperor Sword Sect directly just because Emperor Sword Sect Master made it difficult for me, it would instigate dissatisfaction in the higher-ups of Sanctuary Alliance. Plus, Emperor Sword Sect already lowered their heads before me, Jian Wushuang thought to himself. Lineage of Star was already at the heart of the struggle. Among the higher-ups on Sanctuary Alliance, there were some who were hostile towards Lineage of Star, or even to him. However, there were also some that anticipated and looking forward to him growing and becoming one of the major powers of Sanctuary Alliance. In other words, those who supported him. Between the two, there should be restrictions to one another. However, if Jian Wushuang were to destroy Emperor Sword Sect for trivial matters, although Sanctuary Alliance wouldn't do anything to him, it was inevitable that those higher-ups who were originally on his side would become unhappy. That was not something Jian Wushuang wanted. In Sanctuary Alliance, all forces are complicated. Like the saying, pull one hair and the whole body is affected. To Lineage of Star now, the most important factor is the higher-ups in Sanctuary Alliance. The standing of the great emperors, he couldn't let their standpoints waver. At least, not until after the danger period. As for Emperor Sword Sect, humph, they are just clowns. Even if I don't destroy them now, when the war explodes, I will destroy them if they dare to join the war. Jian Wushuang didn't care much about Emperor Sword Sect. In Eternal Chaotic World, among the major forces who intend to fight Lineage of Star, there were many that were stronger than Emperor Sword Sect. Even if there was really a war, Forces like Emperor Sword Sect weren't too many if there was one extra, weren't too few if there was one less. It didn't matter. Sword Emperor, as you know clearly, I shall not comment further. Goodbye, Luo Xianxia said and then turned to leave. Jian Wushuang watched as Luo Xianxia leave. Then, he waved and an ancient silver spaceship appeared in the void before him. Jian Wushuang entered the cabin and it started traveling at a terrifyingly fast speed to Lineage of Star. With the speed of the silver spaceship, he would arrive in Lineage of Star in no time. However, the silver spaceship only traveled for half a day before it ran into mishap. In the vast dark void, the ancient spaceship was traveling at a fast speed. However, just as the silver spaceship flew past a piece of void, the surroundings suddenly filled with blurry fog, and as the spaceship continued to plunge forward, the gray fog grew thicker. Jian Wushuang in the cabin instantly noticed the changes in the void outside the spaceship. His eyes dilated in shock. It seems that my journey back won't be smooth sailing. Chapter 1883. Boatman in Black. The void was filled with blurry fog. The huge, ancient silver spaceship vanished into thin air while Jian Wushuang stood arrogantly alone. Jian Wushuang's gaze was like lightning. He stared forward with a tinge of coldness. In the void that Jian Wushuang was staring at, there were ripples spreading in the water. In the thick gray fog, there was a simple wooden boat. On the boat, there was an elderly paddling. The elderly was scrawny and tan-skinned. He was shabbily dressed in black with a bamboo hat. Judging by his looks, he was no different from an ordinary boatman. However, after the boatman in black appeared, Jian Wushuang's heart skipped a beat and his face grew solemn. The wooden boat emerged from the gray fog and continued to travel forward until it was 100 miles away from Jian Wushuang before it stopped. I wonder who you are. Why do you block my route? Jian Wushuang remained at the same spot as his voice spread. I am a nobody. My name, Sword Emperor, doesn't have to bother. I came here today for only one matter. The boatman in black smiled and said in a gentle voice. What's the matter? Jian Wushuang asked. Sword Emperor, what do you think about this fish? The boatman in black suddenly pointed in one direction of the void. Jian Wushuang suddenly looked and realized that the void filled with ripples while in the water. There was a huge carp that weighed about 3 jin that jumped out. It was so vivid, as though it was real. The moment the carp jumped out, Jian Wushuang became heavily guarded. Vroom vroom. Jian Wushuang's consciousness was heavily affected. As the image turned, Jian Wushuang came to an ordinary courtyard. In the courtyard, there was a young maiden in snow-white blouse. She was practicing her sword principle while a young man sat by the side and gave pointers casually. He pointed out the young maiden's flaw in her sword principle. The courtyard wasn't huge, but it was a great place to practice swordsmanship. Although it had been years, Jian Wushuang could determine with a glance that the courtyard was where he used to practice swordsmanship when he was young. It was Sword Marquis Mansion. The young maiden in the snow-white blouse was Jian Menja, who had once been entangled with him. The young man who was sitting by the side and giving pointers was him in his younger times. The familiar sight was replayed perfectly. Sword Marquis Mansion, Jian Menja. It has been a while. Jian Wushuang's eyes suddenly turned sharp. Only dreamland. How could it affect me? Jian Wushuang thought, and he instantly plunged towards his true will with unprecedented determination. The image of younger times that he had missed immediately shattered with shockingly fast speed. Finally, the image shattered completely. Jian Wushuang continued to stand arrogantly into the void that was filled with gray fog while the wooden boat in front of him remained at the same spot. However, the boatman in black who was originally on the wooden boat disappeared. Pissed. Extremely soft. If it was any other ordinary almighty, he wouldn't be able to hear the sound, but there was a chilly gleam in Jian Wushuang's eyes. Go! A low roar and Blood Mountain sword was out of its scabbard. Jian Wushuang wielded his sword and brought about boundless sword intention. Simultaneously, it shook off the space-time. The stroke was space-time sword principle that Jian Wushuang created through the combination of his studies about space-time doctrine and sword principle. In space-time sword principle, Jian Wushuang had already created the 7th move and he was merely performing until the 5th move. Dang! Along with a loud clash, the boatman in black's figure flew backward. There was murderous intention soaring from Jian Wushuang's body. With his willpower, the 4 Hongjun golden swords ascended and turned into 4 rays of resplendent golden light. They chased after the boatman in black at lightning speed. He, the boatman in black smiled maliciously. As he retreated, his figure instantly blended into the surrounding grey fog and vanished. Jian Wushuang grew distressed while the 4 Hongjun golden swords immediately stopped. He glanced around and swept out his soul power over the widest range. However, his soul power couldn't see through the surrounding grey fog. He knew that boatman in black should be around, but he couldn't determine the boatman in black's exact location. King of venomous worms, would your secret skill be able to locate him? Jian Wushuang asked. His current power had already reached the top of Emperor God level. Although King of venomous worms had already transformed into full-foot plenilune, his scariest power was actually recovery power. In ferocious fights, it was difficult for him to assist Jian Wushuang. However, he had many auxiliary skills. For example, King of venomous worms knew a secret skill whereby whenever someone got close to Jian Wushuang, King of venomous worms would instantly be alerted and he would remind Jian Wushuang. King of venomous worms shook his head when he heard Jian Wushuang. I can't. Maybe due to the surrounding grey fog, my secret skill wasn't working when I performed it. I see. Jian Wushuang's gaze fixed. He could tell that his opponent was well prepared. For instance, the surrounding thick grey fog should be a formation. Who are you exactly? Jian Wushuang's voice was cold as it spread in the surrounding void. Ever since he had started cultivating, he had offended countless enemies. There were quite a number of them who wanted him dead. However, his power was on display. There shouldn't be many who had the guts to scheme against him. However, the boatman in black that he had come across. He had never heard of him, nor seen him before, but he posed a great threat. One should know that the magic skill earlier. In Jian Wushuang's view, it was definitely the most realistic and scariest magic skill. If it wasn't because he was an inverse cultivator and his mental state had been in training to the point that he had already reached the peak of the 3rd level of mental state, he wouldn't be able to shake off that dreamland forcefully. Plus, the boatman in black's assassination skill was really scary. He could say that the boatman in black was definitely one of the strongest assassins he had seen so far. Sword Emperor. I said that I only have one purpose for this trip. The purpose is naturally to kill you. His gentle voice spread from all directions and Jian Wushuang wasn't sure in which direction the voice came from. Nor did he know the location of the boatman in black. Just then. Vroom. A strange bolt of power charged to Jian Wushuang without any signs before. Soul attack. Jian Wushuang's face changed. Chapter 1884. Disperse soul attack was considered to be Jian Wushuang's weak point. Previously, he had spent a large number of resources to improve his soul. Then, he already formed a substantive soul and substantive soul was extremely strong, far beyond any ordinary gods. Such a powerful soul was also sturdier. Besides, he had already found a soul ring in the ancient battlefield back in Green Fire World. Although the soul ring was damaged badly, it had great defense power towards soul attack. It was Jian Wushuang's soul's reliance. The power of the boatman in black that he was dealing with was unfathomable. The soul attack that he had performed, Jian Wushuang wasn't sure if he could withstand it. Hong! Terrifying soul power was like a sharp sword that tore everything and charged towards Jian Wushuang's substantive soul. At first, it was hindered by the soul ring and its power was diminished by half. The rest of the power was also blocked off by soul walls that Jian Wushuang had put up temporarily. In the middle of the blurry void, Jian Wushuang clenched his teeth as he stood there. His face looked gloomy. Just as the soul power hit his substantive soul, his body quivered. There was a sharp pain that caused the veins on his forehead to pop up as though his head was going to explode. Fortunately, although there was a sharp pain, his substantive soul withstood the soul attack and H was only slightly injured. Luckily, I purposefully spent a large number of resources to improve my soul strength. Luckily, I got a soul ring from the ancient battlefield. Otherwise, Jian Wushuang had yet to recover from the attack. He knew that if there were to be lack of the factors, he would have been killed by the soul attack directly. Suddenly, there was a shrill scream across the void. Jian Wushuang's eyes quickly dilated. He had barely withstood the soul attack earlier, but the boatman in black's attack descended again. The speed was too fast and too sudden. The most crucial part was that Jian Wushuang had no idea where the location of the boatman in black was before he attacked. When he realized, the boatman in black was already behind him. The attack was launched at a close distance. Moon-picking skill. A boundless divine power and bloodline power suddenly erupted. The strongest secret skill of ancient god, moon-picking skill, was performed instantly. Then, the moon-picking skill that Jian Wushuang performed was aiming at the void that he was in. Rumble. The surrounding sky and space-time instantly pressed down. Not only the boatman in black, but also Jian Wushuang himself, felt the pressing of the space-time and was greatly restricted. Comparatively, Jian Wushuang was far less restricted. Jian Wushuang slanted his body and the black light that was swung by the boatman in black flew past. I dodged it. Jian Wushuang was surprised. Moon-picking skill was originally used to pressure opponent using space-time while he launched a full attack at his opponent. Then, Jian Wushuang had used it to dodge the attack. Very smart indeed. The boatman in black was shocked. Just as Jian Wushuang was driving 4 Hongjun golden swords and prepared to counterattack, the boatman in black blended in the surrounding grey fog again and disappeared from within Jian Wushuang's sensory range. Dear Menet. Jian Wushuang looked distressed. Jian Wushuang, this guy merged with the surrounding grey fog and it is hard to trace him. As long as the grey fog is here, he can attack and retreat as he wishes. Only he could attack you, but you couldn't attack him. In other words, he is invincible, King of Venomous Worms said in Jian Wushuang's head. If so, I shall disperse the grey fog. Jian Wushuang fixed his gaze upon the fog. Ancient god unique skill, universal laws. Vroom. 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 The void shook and there were huge ancient god shadows that appeared behind Jian Wushuang. With one glance, there seemed to be more than hundreds thousands of shadows. These shadows were substantiated by boundless divine power. Reincarnation palm. Jian Wushuang roared and a palm containing boundless reincarnation power slapped. The crowded ancient god shadows behind him also gathered boundless divine power and then they swung their palms too. They were all reincarnation palms. One should know that reincarnation palm derived from Jian Wushuang's comprehension of the shocking palm that one-star man left in his head the other day. In terms of power, it was also considered a fierce secret skill and the divine power that required was not little. An ordinary Sir God could at most perform over a dozen palms after a vigorous fight. However, Jian Wushuang himself and also ancient god shadows that he had formed performed the palm. The expense of divine power. An ordinary Sir God wouldn't be able to withstand it. But Jian Wushuang could perform it straightforwardly. Hong. 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 Listening to vigorous explosions, the palms that seemed to contain the entire reincarnation attacked the surrounding void. The surrounding void shattered and broke. Only with one round of attacks, the tens of millions of miles void that Jian Wushuang was in had shattered into pieces. Even space was non-existent. The grey fog in the space was naturally swallowed up mercilessly. Without the hindrance of the grey fog, Jian Wushuang finally locked gazes with the boatman in black. The boatman in black was standing in the void about 10,000 miles away. You are truly an inverse cultivator. Your divine power is boundless. With such attacks, the required divine power should be huge, but you could perform it with ease, without any pressure, the boatman in black complimented. Even though the surrounding grey fog had dispersed, he wasn't in a hurry. Now, you and I can fight a fair fight. Jian Wushuang's eyes were cold. Just as he spoke, swoosh. 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 The 4 golden lights instantly burst out. The speed was enough to strike fear into an ordinary emperor god. Jian Wushuang gave full play to his comprehension of space-time doctrine. Plus, from the increase in his understanding of sword principle, the power of the 4 Hongjun golden swords was much stronger than before. Even without the assistance of the grey fog, I can still kill you. The boatman in black smiled maliciously. When the 4 golden lights appeared in front of him, the black saber that gave out dim light in his hand suddenly shuttled through the 4 golden lights instantly, like a poisonous snake. The four golden lights instantly moved to the side from the impact, while the boatman in black didn't stop but appeared in front of Jian Wushuang. Wow! Boundless dim light flowed out and a black saber descended. Jian Wushuang could only feel that he had instantly fallen into boundless darkness. Chapter 1885. One-hit humph. Jian Wushuang harumphed coldly while his Blood Mountain sword let out a shrill whistle. The sword light instantly burst out along with boundless reincarnation power. The stroke was Reincarnation Sword Principle, the sixth move. It was also the most powerful stroke among Reincarnation Sword Principle that Jian Wushuang had created. Under the trigger of Jian Wushuang's fierce divine power and bloodline power, the power of the stroke was extremely terrifying. Clang! The sound of metal clanged and Jian Wushuang took a few steps back from the impact. Just as he retreated, Hong! A boundless bloodline aura spread and Jian Wushuang's figure suddenly increased in size and instantly turned into black jade colors. Simultaneously, there were heads and arms extending from his body. Ancient tribe body revealed itself with 7 heads and 14 arms. Jian Wushuang's fighting power suddenly reached its peak. The 4 Hongjun golden swords flew out with ferocious sword intention while Jian Wushuang's 14 arms wielded a sword each and attacked. The boatman in black wasn't afraid and swung out his black saber continuously. Dang! 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 There were vigorous clashes of blades in the void. Jian Wushuang had already given full play to his swordsmanship and his close combat skill in collaboration with an intense attack of Hongjun golden sword. Even so, the boatman in black was responding rather at ease. Sword Emperor, compared to when you fought with Palace Master Wu Luo from Abysmal Palace 1,000 years ago, your swordsmanship has improved tremendously. The boatman in black smiled and his figure suddenly became creepy. Just like the reflection in the mirror, he appeared in 3 different places in the void. When Jian Wushuang swept out his consciousness and located the boatman in black, the latter appeared next to him. Then, the black saber was swept at him again. The darkness was as usual and the power was soaring. Bang! Jian Wushuang was pushed out by the impact. After Jian Wushuang steadied himself, his cold eyes locked onto the boatman in black as his face grew solemn. This person is so strong. Strong. He was really strong. One should know that, 1,000 years ago, Jian Wushuang had collaborated his close combat skills with his Hongjun golden swords and he had matched evenly with Luo Xianxia, who was in the 21st place on Heaven and Earth Supreme ranking list. After 1,000 years of cultivation in Emperor Sword Palace, Jian Wushuang had improved tremendously in sword principle and his overall power. Then, he was stronger than he had been 1,000 years ago. But in the end, when he gave full play to his sword principle, close combat skill and Hongjun golden swords, he still had the lower hand. The boatman in black, who exactly is he? Jian Wushuang muttered. He was sure that the boatman in black wasn't a great emperor but an emperor god expert. He was definitely not on the Heaven and Earth Supreme ranking list. However, his power among all emperor gods on Heaven and Earth Supreme ranking list should definitely be in the top 3, or even second to Underworld God. If the grey fog wasn't dispersed by Jian Wushuang forcefully, the boatman in black would be able to fight with Underworld God with the existence of grey fog. He was definitely a terrifying existence. He doesn't exist on Heaven and Earth Supreme ranking list. Could he be from Holocaust sect of Akron Palace? Jian Wushuang couldn't help but ask. Holocaust sect and Akron Palace were hidden. Their experts almost never revealed themselves. Hence, Sanctuary Alliance didn't know much about the experts that the 2 dark forces had. If it was said that the boatman in black was from Holocaust sect of Akron Palace, it was possible. Then, the boatman in black looked at Jian Wushuang. The infamous Sword Emperor is really not weak. Even I will have to pay a price if I want to kill you. Just as he spoke, the boatman in black suddenly flipped his hand and took out a creepy black pearl. Jian Wushuang's heart skipped a beat at the sight of the black pearl. The boatman in black had already squashed the black pearl. The pearl broke and dark energy that struck fear even into Jian Wushuang soared up. The dark energy concentrated on the black saber under the control of the boatman in black. The boatman in black took action. He swung out his black saber. Suddenly, the universe was engulfed in boundless darkness. In the dark, a resplendent light shined. The light was too bright. It was definitely one of the brightest lights Jian Wushuang had seen. And its speed was unbelievably fast. The moment it was swung out, it appeared in front of Jian Wushuang. He who wanted to withstand it by performing 8 divine mountain wouldn't have a chance either. Then, Jian Wushuang's face grew red while 4 out of his 14 arms flowed with billowing divine power and wielded the swords. The 4 sword shadows collided with the light. Clang! A terrifying power traveled, and almost instantly, the 4 swords in the 4 arms flew off. But the power of the light didn't decrease and hit Jian Wushuang's body. Poof! Jian Wushuang spat a mouthful of blood while Jian Wushuang's body retreated tens of thousands of miles away before he regained stability. After Jian Wushuang steadied himself, he suddenly lifted his head. A great emperor's hit? Without a doubt, the power of the light earlier had already surpassed an emperor god's power. It definitely had reached the level of a great emperor. It was equal to a great emperor's hit. Hence, it could throw Jian Wushuang's sword away and continue to injure Jian Wushuang. The boatman in black squinted his eyes. He didn't die? A great emperor's hit was enough to kill an emperor god easily. That was definite. On Heaven and Earth Supreme ranking list, among all emperor gods, only 2 could withstand a great emperor's hit but not die. But then, Jian Wushuang had done it. It seems like your armor was no ordinary chaotic divine treasure. The boatman in black glanced at the crimson armor on Jian Wushuang. He knew that the reason why Jian Wushuang could withstand the hit was because of the armor. Jian Wushuang himself admitted that. His divine power could be compared to an emperor god's favorably, and in addition to his ancient tribe bloodline, his divine power was impressive. However, to block the earlier hit like a great emperor's hit with his defense body, it was impossible. But he had 5 gem armor. As the only treasure that ancient tribe expert from ancient times, Wu Hun, had left for him, although it was broken, his defense power was still terrifying. Like the great emperor hit earlier, its power was diminished by 90% after 5 gem armor. With only the remaining power left, it naturally couldn't kill him. As a great emperor hit couldn't kill you, it seems that I can't do anything about you. Sword Emperor, you're lucky this time. We shall meet again. Just as he said that, the boatman in black floated to the far-off void. Chapter 1886. 200 years. Jian Wushuang stood in the void as he watched the boatman in black leave. He didn't intend to chase after him. He was clear that, in terms of power, the boatman in black was still above him and he had many tricks and techniques on hand. It was already great enough that he got to survive the attack. It was an extravagant hope to take down the boatman in black. This person, who sent him? Jian Wushuang thought to himself. Speaking of assassination, Jian Wushuang thought of Akron Palace and Holocaust sect first. However, his gut feeling told him that the boatman in black should have nothing to do with Akron Palace and Holocaust sect. After all, he had experienced the power of the 2 dark forces before. They either don't attack all, or there would be definite death if they did. Just like the besiegement of Akron Palace last time, if it wasn't because he was lucky and he had met 1-star man, it would have been impossible for him to survive. Then, although the boatman in black was powerful and he could pull a great emperor-like hit, he couldn't corner Jian Wushuang to a desperate situation with that. Akron Palace and Holocaust definitely wouldn't only reach such level when they attacked. As he wasn't from the 2 dark forces, those who could send someone so powerful yet with no fame definitely would only be the existence of the high above. The great emperor finally couldn't hold back and started taking action at me. Jian Wushuang looked gloomy. Among the great emperors in Sanctuary Alliance, there were quite a few that didn't wish to see him grow. Merely because there were some great emperors that were looking forward to his growth, they were restricting one another. Although there are quite a few great emperors that don't wish to see me grow, currently, only Abysmal Saint Master displayed his hostility towards me. Unless the one who wanted to kill me this time is really Abysmal Saint Master? Jian Wushuang muttered. Of course, he wasn't sure. Although, I don't know which great emperor did it this time. But luckily, as he still has scruples, he couldn't kill me personally but only could send the boatman in black earlier. There's a what if in every situation. I'd better be more careful. Otherwise, it might be a great emperor who attacks personally next time. Power. It's power. Jian Wushuang clenched his hands and he felt unwilling to yield. He knew that he was eyed by some great emperor. He had no other ways. He could only be defensive and take the hits. He could only think of ways to resolve the danger that he was in. It was the difference in power. Not until the day that he obtained the 7th step of inverse cultivation skill and truly became an almighty would he be able to stand side by side with the great emperors. Jian Wushuang didn't stay any longer in the void but quickly returned to Lineage of Star. In the huge, luxurious estate that looked like a paradise. In the middle of the estate, there was a river, and the river water was as clear as crystal. There was a boat floating, and there was a lazy man in a purple robe fishing with a bamboo pole in the boat. The entire estate was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Suddenly, the boatman in black appeared at the corner of the boat. He greeted politely, "Master, I'm back. How did it go?" The lazy man asked casually. "I already used Blood Dynasty Pearl, but I still failed in the end. The defensive armor of Jian Wushuang's body is unusual," the boatman in black said. "Oh." The lazy man raised his eyebrows, but he didn't mind much. "Forget it. Let Jian Wushuang live for a while longer." "Oh yeah, you didn't reveal anything to him, right?" "Master, I was in disguise during the attack." "Besides Master, there is no one else who knows it was me," the boatman in black said as his appearance and aura changed at a fast speed. The original tan-skinned, scrawny elderly in black suddenly became an extremely evil-looking lady in a purple robe. The lady looked enchantingly beautiful. Her skill was fair and her body figure was curvy. She was a classically beautiful girl. Even if Jian Wushuang saw this lady, he definitely wouldn't associate her with the boatman in black. Not long after the assassination of the boatman in black, Jian Wushuang returned to Lineage of Star. He cultivated in Emperor Sword Palace for 1,000 years. In the past 1,000 years, nothing had happened in eternal chaotic world. Lineage of Star was rather peaceful. Ever since the fight between Lineage of Star and Abysmal Palace, Lineage of Star had displayed their fierce power, and it served as a deterrent to all forces. Plus, the news about the Master of Star Palace's death had yet to be confirmed. Hence, although the forces and experts had intentions in their heads, no one dared to take action against Lineage of Star at that moment. However, the date of the closing of ancient Mystery Land was getting closer. There were only 200 years left. 200 years were extremely short. The time wasn't much left for Lineage of Star. In the lofty hall. Hall Master Yuan, how did the expert recruitment go? Jian Wushuang asked. As of now, there is a total of 17 Almighties that have accepted our invitation. Among the Almighties, there are 2 Emperor Gods while the rest of the 15 are Sir Gods. Among the 15 Sir Gods, there is one who is on Heaven and Earth Supreme ranking list. In addition to Emperor God Ju Yin who accepted our invitation earlier, we now have 5 people with the fighting power of an Emperor God in Lineage of Star. Plus, Palace Master yourself and Jian Yi, there are 2 peak Emperor Gods. Hall Master Yuan sounded excited. Fighting power of 5 Emperor Gods. Among all sects in Sanctuary Alliance, any forces had yet to achieve that. However, Lineage of Star had achieved it. Of course, that was because the condition that Lineage of Star had offered was too tempting. Not only did they give them chaotic divine treasure, but the temptation of secret skill of Star Palace was also huge. These people in Lineage of Star, are they honest people? Jian Wushuang asked. Palace Master, don't worry. First of all, these people have good reputation. Secondly, they have yet to receive a secret skill of Star Palace. Even though they have gotten their chaotic divine treasure, they are still restricted. Unless it comes to the brink of life and death, they won't abandon Lineage of Star and leave, Hall Master Yuan said. That's great, Jian Wushuang nodded faintly. Although the experts had accepted Lineage of Star's invitation, they had come merely for the benefits offered and they didn't have any relationship with Lineage of Star, let alone a feeling of belonging. It was impossible for them to go all out for Lineage of Star. Hence, Jian Wushuang merely wanted to hang on to them through benefits. Wait until the war exploded. Even if these people didn't risk their all for Lineage of Star, they could at least be useful then. They could definitely increase the overall fighting power of Lineage of Star. Chapter 1887. Time limit is up. Oh yeah, on the way back from Emperor Sword Sect, I met a mysterious expert. Jian Wushuang briefly told him the story about the boatman in black. The boatman in black is extremely scary. He even took out a strange pearl and exploded a hit that wasn't second to a great emperor's hit. Hall Master Yuan, you know more about Sanctuary Alliance than I do. Do you know the origin of the boatman in black? The boatman in black. Hall Master Yuan creased his eyebrows slightly. In Eternal Chaotic World, there are some experts that are powerful but not famous. They have power that isn't second to Emperor God, but they aren't on Heaven and Earth Supreme ranking list. However, there are not many experts like that and the boatman in black that Palace Master was talking about. According to what Palace Master said, the boatman in black's power should be in the top 10 among all Emperor Gods in Heaven and Earth Supreme ranking list. Such expert, there are none according to the people I know. None. Jian Wushuang shook his head and he was helpless. He could tell that the boatman in black was most likely sent over by a great emperor. Which great emperor to be exact? He had no idea either. Forget it. I shall not think about him for now. As for now, I should be dealing with the upcoming danger that Lineage of Star is facing. Jian Wushuang took a deep breath. 200 years. Only 200 years left. 200 years later, the storm would come again. In the 200 years, Jian Wushuang never left but cultivated in seclusion on Sword Star. He was naturally cultivating the King's Sword principle that he had obtained from Emperor Sword Palace. He had comprehended 3 moves from King's Sword principle and every single move could split the heavens and break earth. What Jian Wushuang needed to do then was to master the first move within 200 years. As long as he masters the first move from King's Sword principle, it meant that he had another extra killer move. Time flew past. During the 1,000 years when Jian Wushuang had comprehended in Emperor Sword Palace, Eternal Chaotic World had been extremely quiet. Plus, as Jian Wushuang had returned, the forces and experts in Sanctuary Alliance naturally wouldn't dare to incite trouble. In the blink of an eye, 200 years had passed. The ancient mystery land that only opened every 5 million years and only opened for 10,000 years each time. Then, the time limit of 10,000 years was ending. In the huge ancient mystery land, there were a total of 4 entrances and every entrance was huge. As the time limit of 10,000 years was up, the experts who were wandering in ancient mystery land walked out from the entrance one after another. At one of the entrance, swoosh, swoosh, there were flashes of light. Then, there were 2 figures that walked out from the huge wormhole. The 2 people were Sir God Yun Suo and Sir God Li Quan. They were 2 powerful Sir Gods. During these years, the 2 had teamed up to wander in ancient mystery land. After wandering, they had gained a bountiful harvest. After the 2 exited the wormhole. Sir God Yun Suo suddenly paused and looked around in shock. Where are there so many people? Sir God Yun Suo could see a large number of figures gathered around the entrance. The figures were made up of strong and weak people. Plus, within the range of his soul power senses, he could feel many auras hidden in the void nearby. In the past, when ancient mystery land closed, although there were some experts waiting outside, most of them were spies from intelligence organization. The amount was never this high. Sir God Yun Suo exclaimed in surprise. Li Quan, do you know what happened? Sir God Yun Suo looked at Sir God Li Quan by his side. I heard. Sir God Li Quan smiled. I heard that Vientiane Tower sent out a message not too long ago that the Master of Star Palace from Lineage of Star had passed away and he passed away in ancient mystery land. However, the news is only Vientiane Tower's guess. It has yet to be verified. All these years, there were many forces and experts in Sanctuary Alliance that wanted to test Lineage of Star's actual situation. Even Abysmal Palace fought with Lineage of Star personally. Until now, no one was certain. Now, ancient mystery land is going to close. This is a chance to surely verify if the Master of Star Palace died. Of course, there are many who are here. I see. Sir God Yun Suo was shocked. The scary Master of Star Palace passed away? No one knows if it was true or false, but wait till ancient mystery land is closed entirely and see if the Master of Star Palace walks out of ancient mystery land. Then, we will be able to tell. Why not? Let's wait here too, Sir God Li Quan suggested. Sure. Sir God Yun Suo nodded immediately. At the entrance, there were more and more experts gathered and there were many spies sent by various forces. Not only that particular entrance, but the other 3 entrances also had a large number of spies keeping watch, and they had been doing that for a very long time. Ever since the news of the Master of Star Palace's death, the spies had been keeping watch at the entrances. No matter which exit did Master of Star Palace took, all forces in Sanctuary Alliance would receive the news at the first instant. Until then, they didn't see the Master of Star Palace. The time continued to fly past. It was getting closer to the time where ancient Mystery Land would be closed entirely. There's only 1 hour left. In another hour, ancient Mystery Land will close. The experts who wandered in ancient Mystery Land all these years, those who are alive has come out from ancient Mystery Land long ago. However, the Master of Star Palace has yet to show himself. It seems that Vientiane Tower's assumption is true. Humph, I could tell long ago that the Master of Star Palace had passed away, but I couldn't be certain about it. But now, I am definite. The experts from all forces locked their gazes upon the entrances. The closing time was getting closer, and the Master of Star Palace was nowhere to be seen. The experts were certain. 1 hour was ending soon. 10 breaths, only 10 breaths left. The Master of Star Palace is not coming out. It is definite that the Master of Star Palace has died. The experts from all forces were sighing. Very soon, with the experts' countdown, the 10 breaths time ended too. The time limit of 10,000 years was up. Theoretically, as the time was up, the 4 entrances of ancient Mystery Land should close. However, there were no changes to the 4 entrances. The 4 huge wormholes didn't move an inch, and there was no sign of them closing. What happened? The time is up. Why are the 4 entrances not closing? Did we remember wrongly? Is it not time for ancient Mystery Land to close yet? Chapter 1888. Great Shock remembered the time wrongly? Impossible. It is possible if only the 2 of us remembered wrongly, but it is impossible for all of us to remember wrongly. The 10,000 years time limit is up. There is no doubt about this. But the entrance of ancient Mystery Land didn't close? Let's wait. Maybe it will be closed again. The experts at the 4 entrances were watching closely. 1 hour, 2 hours, 1 day, 2 days. In the blink of an eye, a year had passed. The 4 entrances of ancient Mystery Land were still there. There were no changes at all. There were even some experts who had tried to enter ancient Mystery Land and walked out from ancient Mystery Land again. It was smooth. Then, everyone was dumbfounded. At the same time, the news spread around Sanctuary Alliance and the entire eternal chaotic world. The time limit of 10,000 years had been reached, but ancient Mystery Land hadn't closed. When everyone found out about the news, they were astonished. One should know that ancient Mystery World was from ancient times. Since the Second Era until then, ancient Mystery Land had been opened countless times over the years. It had already become a pattern that it would open every 5 million years and opens for 10,000 years each time. It had been so for countless times, and there was never once any mistake. But then, it was obviously an unexpected incident. On Thunderbolt Island, on the peak of the Sanctuary Mountain, in a huge courtyard, there was an elderly in grey who was fishing quietly with a bamboo pole and single prank footbridge. Suddenly, a middle-aged man with silver-white hair that barged into the courtyard. Ancestor Xianxia, something happened. The man with silver-white hair walked next to the elderly in grey. What happened? The elderly in grey, also the 4th place on Heaven and Earth Supreme ranking list, put down the bamboo pole and looked. I just received news. After ancient Mystery Land opened for 10,000 years, it didn't close, the man with silver-white hair said. What? Ancestor Xianxia's face changed. No matter if it were Ancestor Xianxia or East Royal Emperor, they were both the higher-ups in Sanctuary Alliance. Also, they were the peak experts of eternal chaotic world. They knew the deepest and greatest secrets of eternal chaotic world. Similarly, they also knew what ancient Mystery Land contained. Ancient Mystery Land had been opening and closing in order, and they didn't care. But then, the other few already knew? Ancestor Xianxia asked. I already sent a message to them. However, you have to inform him, East Royal Emperor said. The he that he was talking about was naturally the widely acknowledged strongest one, Emperor Bai. Emperor Bai was supreme. Even among great emperors in Sanctuary Alliance, there were very few who could find Emperor Bai. Just like East Royal Emperor. Although he was a great emperor, his power was considered ordinary among great emperors. He wasn't close to Emperor Bai, so he didn't have any way to inform Emperor Bai. "Let me do it," Ancestor Qian Chen said. He then immediately took out a token. After a while, Ancestor Qian Chen spoke again. "I already messaged him. However, he temporarily didn't reply. We can only wait." "Then, let's wait," East Royal Emperor said helplessly. Not only Ancestor Qian Chen and East Royal Emperor. The great emperors in Sanctuary Alliance had found out about what had happened at Ancient Mystery Land one after another. These great emperors were hardly concerned about anything as they were all high and mighty. But then, they were really shocked. Ancient Mystery Land was associated with too many things after all. To forces and experts of Sanctuary Land, it'd be great if Ancient Mystery Land never closed. One should know that there were boundless opportunities in Ancient Mystery Land. Countless experts were dying to wander inside, but unfortunately, it only opened once every 5 million years and only opened for 10,000 years each time. But then, Ancient Mystery Land had opened for 10,000 years but didn't close. Didn't it mean that they could continue to wander inside for the rest of the time? Of course, although the incident that happened in Ancient Mystery Land had stirred a great commotion. There was another thing that caught quite a lot of attention too. The news about the Master of Star Palace's death was finally verified. Although Ancient Mystery Land never closed, the Master of Star Palace had never exited Ancient Mystery Land in the 10,000 years time limit. That was a fact. They lost their biggest fear at the bottom of their hearts. Even though there was Jian Wushuang attending garrison duty personally at Lineage of Star, the forces and experts didn't look at Jian Wushuang as a bigger threat than the Master of Star Palace. In an instant, all forces and experts in Sanctuary Alliance began to stir. Lineage of Star. What should be here is finally here. Jian Wushuang's face was cold. Hall Master Yuan, Hall Master Jiu Xin and Hall Master Nai Yun were solemn. Palace Master had passed away 3,000 years ago, and Lineage of Star has made the biggest preparation in the past 3,000 years. We also destroyed many enemies. It is considered good. As for what comes next, it will depend on Lineage of Star if we can pass through the danger, Hall Master Yuan said. In actual fact, Hall Master Yuan and the others already felt grateful. They were glad that each force had scruples because of the Master of Star Palace, and it had given them another 3,000 years. The 3,000 years were too important to them. Hall Master Yuan, invite all the guest elders of Lineage of Star here. I think it's time to show our cards now, Jian Wushuang said. Yes, Hall Master Yuan nodded and immediately sent out messages. In a lofty palace, there was a spacious void. In the void, there were a total of over 20 thrones towering. These people were the almighties that Lineage of Star had recruited over the years via the provision of huge benefits. Including Emperor God Ju Yin, there were a total of 18. Then, the 18 almighties were talking among themselves. They didn't look too good as they spoke to one another. I never expected that the Master of Star Palace had really passed away. Although we had already guessed so, it is hard to accept the fact. The moment the Master of Star Palace's death is verified, Lineage of Star will definitely be in great trouble. Everyone has to be mentally prepared. The news about the Master of Star Palace's death was widespread, and the almighties at the spot naturally knew about it as well. Just then, there were 4 figures that slowly substantiated in the void. Jian Wushuang was the leader of the 4. Jian Wushuang sat down on the highest throne directly while Hall Master Yuan and the other 2 Hall Masters stood by his side. Chapter 1889. Let imagination run wild. Just as they saw the arrival of Jian Wushuang and the others, everyone who was in discussion in the void immediately became quiet. Jian Wushuang sat at the highest place as he glanced at all almighties in front of him with a sharp gaze. The almighties, including the 3 emperor gods, couldn't help but feel a tinge of fear when their eyes met Jian Wushuang's. Similarly, they had fighting powers of an emperor god. However, Jian Wushuang had reached the peak of emperor god, and those who could match evenly were just a handful. The few emperor gods at the scene were too far apart with Jian Wushuang. Everyone, I think you have received the news. Jian Wushuang's voice was cold. That's right. The master of Star Palace has passed away, and he passed away 3,000 years ago. After he passed away, I became the newly appointed palace master in Lineage of Star. The Almighties were silent and no one spoke. Actually, everyone should be mentally prepared for this outcome, right? Jian Wushuang looked around. The Almighties were surprised, but no one denied it. The news about the Master of Star Palace's death was a widespread rumor for very long. It was just that it wasn't verified. They naturally knew the news. Hence, before they accepted Lineage of Star's invitation, they were well prepared. Then, the news was verified to be true. Sword Emperor. There was suddenly a thick voice. There was a 3-meter-tall, mountain-like brawny man that stood up among the crowd. The brawny man was Emperor God Shen Wu, who was extremely strong in defense. Sword Emperor, don't worry. As we accepted Lineage of Star's invitation previously, we definitely won't go back on our words. No matter what Lineage of Star has been through, we will definitely be by Lineage of Star's side. I won't say we would risk everything for Lineage of Star, but we would definitely go all out, Emperor God Shen Wu said. Yes, we would definitely go all out as a meager contribution for Lineage of Star. The Almighties stood up one after another and expressed their standings. The Almighties that Hall Master Yuan invited had great reputations and they were men of integrity. Jian Wushuang smiled at the sight. If so, thank you, everyone. Jian Wushuang smiled. Everyone, don't worry. Lineage of Star is different from before. Even when the Master of Star Palace passed away, Lineage of Star wasn't someone who could threaten as they wish. As long as everyone works together, we should be able to deal with any danger. All right everyone, let's get prepared. Jian Wushuang waved and beckoned for the Almighties to be dismissed. Just then, hold on a second. There was suddenly a low voice. Jian Wushuang and everyone at the scene looked to the source of the voice subconsciously. There was a man in a black robe that revealed a malicious smile. That's Sir God Bei Han. There was no problem with his reputation. However, his character is the worst of all, and he is relatively more selfish. Hall Master Yuan sent a message in silence. Selfish? Jian Wushuang was surprised, but he looked calm on the outside. I wonder how can I help you, Sir God Bei Han? Sword Emperor, from what I know, many years ago, the Master of Star Palace once massacred wantonly in eternal chaotic world. Hence, he offended many enemies, including many major forces. Those enemies were mostly killed by Sword Emperor in recent years. But the major forces are still here, Sir God Bei Han said. Previously, when the Master of Star Palace was here, he could serve as a deterrent force to all the major forces. But now, the Master of Star Palace died and many of the forces might team up to exterminate Lineage of Star. Although Lineage of Star is powerful and there's the Sword Emperor attending garrison duty personally, I'm afraid it would be very difficult to withstand so many forces simultaneously. It's very difficult. However, Lineage of Star isn't as simple as it looks. If there were to be a war, we could fight against the forces, Jian Wushuang said calmly. Plus, if we really fail to do so, everyone could leave when it comes to a hopeless situation. We, Lineage of Star, wouldn't stop nor question you. Sir God Bei Han, you don't have to be worried. Even so, if Lineage of Star were to really be exterminated, secret skill of Star Palace would definitely be in the hands of the forces. By then, it would be impossible for us to get secret skill of Star Palace from the hands of the forces. In other words, we will fight a tough war alongside Lineage of Star, but we won't get any benefit at all. Sir God Bei Han's voice sounded rather evil. The moment he said that, there were many people whose expressions changed. Among the Almighties, there were many who came for the secret skill of Star Palace. Lineage of Star had promised that they could receive the inheritance of secret skill of Star Palace if they were to serve Lineage of Star for 10,000 years. However, just as Sir God Bei Han had pointed out, if in the upcoming war, Lineage of Star were to be exterminated, who could they get secret skill of Star Palace from? They fought for Lineage of Star but wouldn't get anything in the end. That wasn't something they wanted. Sir God Bei Han, what are you trying to say? Jian Wushuang glanced at Sir God Bei Han. I only want to give Sword Emperor a suggestion, Sir God Bei Han said. What suggestion? Jian Wushuang remained composed. Very simple. Before the war, which is now, let us inherit the secret skill of Star Palace. Then, not only will we fight Lineage of Star with our all, most importantly, with secret skill of Star Palace, we also could give full play to our trump cards. When we perform our trump cards, we could also increase lineage of stars winning chances. Isn't it a perfect plan for both parties? Sir God Bei Han said. Hearing what Sir God Bei Han had said, the surrounding almighties' faces changed. There were a few that stole glances at Sir God Bei Han. Actually, they had had the same idea as Sir God Bei Han, but they didn't dare to bring it up. Jian Wushuang looked indifferent, but his heart grew gloomy. You want to get the inheritance of secret skill of Star Palace now? Sir God Bei Han, you thought great, Jian Wushuang sneered. The war has yet to start and all of you have yet to do anything for lineage of Star, but you want to receive the rewards and benefits? That's a joke. Forget that it would be a life and death war, even if it was a simple mission. Have you ever seen that one could get all the rewards and benefits for completing a task before completing it? In this world, would there be such an amazing deal? Sir God Bei Han, are you sure you're not letting your imagination run wild? Chapter 1890. Give way. Jian Wushuang's voice was cold. In the end, the entire vast void was like it was frozen. Sir God Bei Han suddenly grew awkward. Sword Emperor, I was just suggesting a method satisfactory for both parties. You should also put yourself in my shoes. After all, we do not wish to put in so much effort and get nothing in return. Humph, everything in this world has risk. You want to receive the secret skill of Star Palace from lineage of Star, but you do not want to take any risk? If I were to let you inherit the secret skill of Star Palace now, when the war exploded, regardless of the situation of lineage of Star, it wouldn't be related to you. Would you fight the war for lineage of Star wholeheartedly? Sir God Bei Han, don't treat the others like idiots. I believe that if anyone here was me, none of you would be willing to give the promised benefits to the other party before the war began. Am I right? Jian Wushuang looked around. The surrounding almighties exchanged a look. Although most of them wanted to receive the inheritance of secret skill of Star Palace then, they knew that what Jian Wushuang said made sense. There was no free lunch in this world. You have to put in effort before you get rewarded. That's a definite. One had yet to put in effort but wanted to receive a reward. It was really ridiculous. Sword Emperor. There was a figure that stood up. It was Emperor God Ju Yin, who had been invited by Jian Wushuang personally and also the first who had opted to join lineage of Star's campsite. Emperor God Ju Yin smiled. Everyone, maybe you don't know, but I am a killer. I have been a killer for so many years. Although killers are on the dark side, I also know a simple principle. Work first, get paid later. Killing has a huge risk. If I were to be reckless, I would lose my life. However, there are still many killers that are constantly taking a mission for a targeted reward. Comparatively, I find lineage of Star's invitation that we accepted not as risky as an ordinary killer mission. After all, when we are at the brink of death, we can leave directly and lineage of Star won't stop us. As long as we are careful, our lives are ensured. As for what Sir God Bei Han said, to get an inheritance of secret skill of Star Palace, and only then fight for lineage of Star, that's a joke. The moment he said that, the surrounding people nodded in agreement. Only Sir God Bei Han looked embarrassed. Humph. If I do not get the secret skill of Star Palace first, I won't fight for lineage of Star, Sir God Bei Han said. If so, forgive lineage of Star for not seeing you off. Go ahead. Jian Wushuang looked cold. Hall Master Yuan, Hall Master Jiu Xin and Hall Master Nai Yun looked cold too. Lineage of Star wasn't like before anymore. Forget about the experts that they invited. With the Dao soldiers alone, it was a terrifying fighting power. With such fighting power, Sir God Bei Han was nothing. He wanted to leave and Jian Wushuang and his troop wouldn't stop him. Very good. I'd like to see how lineage Star is going to survive this danger. Humph. Sir God Bei Han humphed coldly and left. Jian Wushuang and no one at the scene stopped him. After Sir God Bei Han left, everyone, although what Sir God Bei Han said was like a wild fantasy, it also reminded me. It wasn't a small war after all. If there was any mistake, lineage of Star would be doomed forever. You might return empty-handed. So, I have changed my mind now. Jian Wushuang's voice spread. The Almighties immediately looked at Jian Wushuang. Changed his mind? Was Jian Wushuang agreeing to let them get the inheritance of secret skill of Star Palace? Everyone, as you are coming for the secret skill of Star Palace, you definitely have a certain understanding of lineage of Star. You should know that there are 3 volumes in secret skill of Star Palace and they contain different level of power. Now, although I can't let you inherit the secret skill of Star Palace ahead of time, I can promise those who put in extra effort during the war for lineage of Star, we will reward each of you according to merit. In accordance with credit, you may inherit the first volume of secret skill of Star Palace first. If you put in a great effort, you may inherit the second volume. Then, even if lineage of Star were to be destroyed in the end, as long as all of you gave your all, you would stand a chance to receive the secret skill of Star Palace during the process, so you won't return empty-handed. What do you think? Jian Wushuang looked around. Hearing what Jian Wushuang had said, the Almighties beamed with joy. Reward according to merit and receive the inheritance of secret skill of Star Palace during the process of war. Compared to the promised 100,000 years of service to get the inheritance, it was way more secure. Sword Emperor, don't worry. No matter what happens next in Lineage of Star, we will go all out. Yes, all out. The Almighties on the spot showed their standing. They looked determined. If they were to be said to be insecure previously, no one thought so after. Everyone was convinced and willing to go to war for Lineage of Star. Let's go down and prepare. Jian Wushuang waved. The Almighties left one after another. In the void, there was only Jian Wushuang and the other 3 Hall Masters left. Palace Master, I never expected for you to give way. Hall Master Yuan looked at Jian Wushuang in shock. Actually, you don't have to give way, and these people would still fight for Lineage of Star. Even so, they have scruples more or less. They might even be insecure. When it comes to crucial times, these scruples and insecurities will affect the entire situation. Plus, Sir God Beihan said something right. If these experts were to get the secret skill of Star Palace, their fighting powers would become stronger. Hence, I will separate the secret skill of Star Palace into 3 volumes to receive the inheritance. If they were to inherit the first volume, they would definitely figure a way to get the second and third volumes. In actual fact, it is great enough to be able to cultivate the secret skill of Star Palace. To cultivate the second volume, it's too difficult. It is impossible to cultivate the third one. Only we know that, and these people don't know. Jian Wushuang smiled. That's true. Hall Master Yuan nodded faintly. Ever since the Master of Star Palace had received the secret skill of Star Palace, only Jian Wushuang and the Master of Star Palace had cultivated the second volume. The others had merely got the first volume cultivated. As for the third volume, there was no one who had cultivated it successfully.